When I turned 65, I thought it would be a moment for celebration, surrounded by family, love, and laughter. Instead, I sat alone, staring at a table set for 8, the candles burning lower with every passing minute. No one showed up. No phone calls. No messages. The empty space around me felt suffocating like a punch in the gut. My fingers trembled as I checked my phone again, hoping for something. Anything. But it was the same silence. I tried to smile, tried to convince myself that maybe they were just running late. Maybe they had a good reason. But deep down I knew. They weren't coming. It was the same old story. Over the years I had hosted every holiday, every birthday, making sure everyone had a place to gather. A reason to be together. But now on my 65th birthday it felt like the last straw. I was invisible. The doorbell finally rang and I hoped it was anyone. But when I opened it, it was just a delivery. A note was left on the doorstep. A reminder that the world could forget you in the blink of an eye. As I brought the package inside, I saw the photo my daughter-in-law, Jessica, had posted earlier in the day. Pictures of her, my son Ryan, and the kids all enjoying a lavish cruise while I sat here alone. The hurt wasn't immediate. I felt numb, too numb to cry. Instead, I simply looked at the screen, and something in me shifted. I thought I'd lived a good life. I thought I had given enough. But today I realized that was never enough for them. I walked away from my empty party, holding the photo in my hand. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. It was time for a change. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to beg for a place in their lives. What I needed was to take control of what was left of mine. And the first step started today. The next day, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles deep into your bones and refuses to leave. I walked into the kitchen, making coffee for one, and glanced at the calendar on the wall. Another day, another empty space. The kids were all off doing their own thing the same way they always had. I had become a background character in the movie of their lives. My mind wandered back to the party. The table had been set with care, the way I always did for everyone. The beautiful china I had inherited from my mother. The silver cutlery polished to perfection. It all felt like a mockery now. I had given them everything, and yet it seemed I was the one who was always left behind. The more I thought about it, the more it stung. But there was no use crying over it. It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring them back. Instead, I decided to take control of the situation. I needed to do something for myself, even if it was the smallest thing. That afternoon, I walked into my study and pulled out the stack of old papers I had kept in the drawer for years. My husband, Thomas, had always handled the finances, and I had trusted him completely. But now, with him gone, I realized I had no idea where we stood financially. The thought of calling a lawyer or dealing with the bank felt overwhelming, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I sat down at the desk and slowly began sorting through the papers. Some of them were old receipts, bills, and outdated insurance forms. But there, tucked in the corner of the drawer, was something I had forgotten about, a letter from the bank. I opened it carefully, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a statement for an account in my name. I had no memory of opening it. My hand shook as I read through the details. The balance was substantial, much more than I had ever expected. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. There was money I didn't know about. Money that could be mine, not theirs. Suddenly, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was something I could do to protect myself. I didn't have to be at their mercy anymore. I didn't have to be the one they ignored and dismissed. I had been living in the shadow of their decisions for far too long. It was time to step into the light. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number for the bank, ready to take the first step toward regaining my independence. The next morning I felt a sense of urgency in the pit of my stomach. After I made my coffee and sat in the quiet of the house, I thought about the phone call I had made the day before. The bank had given me some information, but it was only the beginning. I still couldn't fully grasp the extent of everything that had been kept from me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had overlooked all these years. I had been so focused on doing the right thing, keeping everything in order for the family, that I had forgotten to look out for myself. I needed answers. I couldn't rely on anyone else to give them to me. It was up to me now. I grabbed my purse, called a cab, and headed straight for the bank. The ride felt long, but it also gave me time to think. What would happen if I found out more? What if there was more hidden away? I had no idea, but the thought of it gave me a strange sense of control that I hadn't felt in a long time. I arrived at the bank and made my way to the office of Mrs. Patterson, the manager who had spoken with me the day before. She was friendly, but I could tell she was wary of the situation. She greeted me with a soft smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Matthews. I'm glad you're back. I've been reviewing your accounts and I think we can figure this out together." Her words were kind, but there was something in the way she spoke that made me wonder if she knew something I didn't. She pulled up the information on her computer and began walking me through the accounts. "I see you have several investments that you weren't aware of," she said. "Some of them have been rolling over for years, and there's also a trust fund set up in your name." The words felt surreal. Trust fund? Investments? I had no idea any of this existed. "How long have these accounts been here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The trust was established by your husband about 5 years ago," Mrs. Patterson replied. "And the investment started about the same time. He worked with our firm personally to ensure that you would be well taken care of." I felt my heart race. This was more than I had ever expected. I had no idea my husband had taken these steps to secure my future. I never had to worry, and yet I had never known. The revelation was a mixture of relief and disbelief. My eyes were fixed on the screen, processing the details. My hands were clammy and I could barely take it all in. "You've also got a sizable amount in a savings account," she continued. "And there's more than enough to keep you comfortable, Mrs. Matthews." I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of everything. Why hadn't Thomas ever mentioned this to me? He had always been so protective of me, and now it felt like he had been protecting me even after he was gone. I felt a knot in my chest. I was grateful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I thanked Mrs. Patterson for her help, but my mind was already racing. I had no intention of letting this go. I had been kept in the dark for far too long, and I wasn't going to let anyone take control of my life anymore. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of documents Mrs. Patterson had given me. The weight of it all was starting to sink in. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of control, real control. I hadn't asked for any of this, but now that it was in my hands, I knew I had to make decisions. The house, the money, the investments, everything was mine, but I hadn't known about any of it until now. I looked at the documents again, reading over the trust details, the account numbers, and all the fine print. It was overwhelming, but at the same time there was a fire in me, a determination to use this knowledge to protect myself. The house had always been my home. It was where Thomas and I built our life, where we raised Ryan, and where we had laughed and cried together. But now, it felt like it was just a symbol of everything that had been taken from me. I thought about what Jessica and Ryan had said, the way they treated me. They had made it clear that I wasn't welcome, that I was just an inconvenience to them. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, but I pushed it down. I couldn't afford to make decisions based on emotion. I needed to be smart. The next day I called a lawyer, someone who could help me navigate all this. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't face it alone. The lawyer, Mr. Thomas Reed, was kind but straightforward. He listened to my story, then reviewed the paperwork with me. "This trust is ironclad," he said. "Your late husband clearly wanted you to be secure. No matter what happened, you have full control over everything. This is your life, Grace. You don't have to answer to anyone but yourself." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just drifting along, waiting for someone to take care of me. I was taking care of myself. "What about my son and daughter-in-law?" I asked. "They don't have any claim to this, do they?" Mr. Reed paused for a moment, then looked at me with a firm expression. "No," he said. "This is all yours. They may try to push you, but legally they have no rights here." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I never wanted it to come to this, but I knew I couldn't let them walk all over me anymore. It was time to stand up for myself. I thanked Mr. Reed and left his office, feeling like I had just taken the first step on a new path. The world had changed, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own future. The days following my visit to the lawyer felt different. There was a weight in the air, a shift I couldn't quite explain. I was no longer the same person I had been before, the one who blindly followed, hoping that things would somehow work out. I was the one making decisions now, and that felt both empowering and terrifying. I spent hours organizing the documents, making sure I understood everything. Each piece of paper, each number, felt like a confirmation of the new reality I was stepping into. It was surreal the way life could change so suddenly. It was only a few weeks ago that I had been celebrating my 65th birthday, expecting to be surrounded by my family. Now, I was sitting in my home alone, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't truly alone. I had power over my own life again. I spent the next few days looking into the details of the investments, the trust, and the other assets Thomas had left behind. I couldn't believe how much he had done for me without ever telling me. I felt a strange mix of gratitude and anger. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he kept this all from me? I thought about what Jessica and Ryan had said, how they had tried to push me out of the family. I thought about the way they had dismissed me, as if I was nothing more than a burden. But I wasn't a burden. I was strong and I had the means to take care of myself. One morning as I was sitting in the living room, going over the financial details once again, I heard the sound of footsteps outside. My heart skipped a beat. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. It was Jessica, standing on the other side. Her face a mixture of uncertainty and defiance. "Grace," she said, her voice stiff. "We need to talk." I stood there for a moment just looking at her, weighing my options. I could slam the door in her face, but something told me I needed to hear her out. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She walked in slowly, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for something. "I'm sure you've seen the news," she began, avoiding my gaze. "We're planning to sell the house. It's just too big for us now." I raised an eyebrow, trying not to laugh. "Is that so?" I said calmly, keeping my voice steady. "And what about the trust? The investments? What do you think of those?" Her face paled slightly, and for a moment I saw the mask slip. "I don't know what you mean," she stammered. "Ryan and I just thought it would be better if you could take everything from me." I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. She flinched, but I didn't care. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let them take it all away. "You can't take anything from me, Jessica," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I know exactly what Thomas left behind, and it's mine. Not yours. Not Ryan's." Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic creeping in. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This isn't about the money. It's about family." "Family?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "What family? The one that leaves me out of everything? The one that chooses a cruise over my birthday?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. There was nothing left to say. "I suggest you go back to your family, Jessica," I said, turning toward the door. "And tell them the truth. Tell them I'm not going anywhere." The next morning the phone rang. It was Ryan. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, my heart pounding. It was time to confront him, to face whatever game they thought they were playing. "Mom," he said, his voice cautious, like he wasn't sure how to begin. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "About what, Ryan?" I replied, keeping my tone calm, too calm. "Jessica told me about the trust and the bank accounts," he said, his words stumbling out. I could hear the tension in his voice, the hint of panic. "I don't know what she's told you," I said, cutting him off. "But I'm sure you're both aware by now that I know exactly what's going on." There was a long silence on the other end, and I imagined him sitting there trying to piece everything together. "Mom, you have to understand," Ryan said, his voice more pleading now. "This was never supposed to happen. We were just trying to make sure everything was handled." "Handled?" I repeated, incredulous. "Handled how? By taking everything from me? By pretending I wasn't even here?" "No, that's not it," Ryan replied quickly. We thought it would be easier if you moved out, into one of those retirement communities." My chest tightened at the words. Easier. He thought it would be easier to just push me aside. I felt the weight of everything they had taken for granted. "Easier for you, maybe," I said, my voice rising slightly. "But what about me? What about what I need? What about everything I've built here?" "Mom, we just thought it would be better for everyone," Ryan said, sounding frustrated. "Better for everyone?" I asked, my voice sharp now. "You mean better for you and Jessica? You want the house, You want the money. And you want me out of the picture. Ryan didn't respond right away. When he did, his words were slow and careful. I never meant for it to get this far, he said, almost apologetic. But Mom, we need the space. We're trying to move forward with our own lives and we thought it would be easier if you weren't living here anymore. The words hit me like a slap. They were trying to justify everything. Trying to make it seem like they were doing me a favor by pushing me away. But I wasn't the one who needed fixing. They were the ones who had lost sight of what really mattered. You don't get to decide what's best for me, I said, my voice unwavering. You don't get to decide what happens to this house or my life. I'm not your responsibility anymore. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I wondered if Ryan was even listening. But then he spoke again, this time more quietly. What are you going to do, Mom? He asked, the fear in his voice finally breaking through. I'm going to live my life, Ryan, I said, my voice calm but firm. And if you and Jessica think you can push me around, you're in for a surprise. He didn't say anything after that, and the silence stretched on between us. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. I had no idea what the future held, but I was ready to take it on. I had spent too many years letting them dictate my life. It was time for me to make my own decisions, to stop letting them use me as a pawn. I wasn't just going to sit by and watch as they took everything from me. I was going to fight for what was mine. The house, the money, my dignity. They thought they could push me aside, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent my time making calls, organizing my papers, and preparing for what would come next. The feeling of uncertainty lingered in the back of my mind, but each task I completed made me feel more in control, more empowered. I could feel the weight of the situation pushing me forward. The house, the trust, the money. None of it mattered if I didn't make the right moves now. It wasn't just about the material things, it was about reclaiming my life. I had been pushed aside for so long, but now I was taking steps to stand up for myself. Late one evening, after I had gone through everything one last time, I decided to contact an attorney I had heard of from a friend. I needed someone who could help me navigate the legal maze I was about to step into. The lawyer's office was small, but the man who greeted me, Mr. Davis, seemed capable. He listened as I explained everything, taking notes, his brow furrowed as he processed the details. You're in a stronger position than you think, Grace, he said after a long pause. You've got everything you need. The assets, the trust, it's all there for you to protect. If they want to fight you for it, we'll make sure they know exactly where they stand. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time, I wasn't just waiting for something to happen, I was making it happen. I want to handle this quietly, I said, my voice steady. I don't want to make a scene, but I also don't want them thinking they can just take what's mine. Mr. Davis nodded. We can make that happen. We'll file everything under the radar. We'll take the necessary steps without drawing too much attention. When the time comes, they'll know you've been prepared all along. The conversation lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I wasn't just the person who had been left behind anymore. I wasn't the one who had to beg for scraps. I was the one in control. That night I sat in my living room, looking around at the house that had been home to so many memories. It was still beautiful, still mine. I didn't need anyone's approval to keep it that way. They thought I was just an old woman, easy to manipulate, easy to cast aside. But they were wrong. They had no idea who they were messing with. I wasn't weak. I wasn't helpless. I had the power to change everything. And I would. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was prepared to fight for what was rightfully mine. The next morning I woke up early and made my way to the bank. The papers I needed were waiting for me, ready to be filed. I felt a strange calm as I handed them over to the clerk. There was no turning back now. My future was in my hands and I was going to make sure no one took it from me again. The following week, I felt the familiar tension in the air as I prepared to face Jessica and Ryan. I had done everything I could, everything that was necessary, but there was still that gnawing feeling in my gut that they would try to push me again. But this time it would be different. I was no longer the person they could control. The day arrived when I knew they would try to make their move. I was sitting at my kitchen table when Ryan walked in, his face tense, trying to hold on to the last threads of his previous arrogance. Mom, we need to talk, he said. His words clipped, as if he had something important to say but didn't quite know how to say it. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him waiting. "You've been avoiding us," he continued. "Jessica, and I think it's time we had a real conversation about the house, about everything." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "We're not trying to hurt you, but this is just too much for us to handle on our own." I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms, meeting his gaze without flinching. "What exactly are you trying to say, Ryan?" I asked, my voice steady but with an edge. "We want to sell the house," he said, almost too quickly. "It's too much for us. We can't keep up with everything, and honestly we've been looking at a new place. A fresh start." The words stung even though I expected them. I had heard this coming, but hearing it out loud felt like a slap in the face. "So what now?" I asked, maintaining my calm. "Do you think you can just take it from me?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, not meeting my eyes. "We think it's the best thing for everyone," he muttered. "You don't need all this space anymore." I shook my head slowly, letting his words sink in. I had given everything for them, sacrificed so much, and this was how they repaid me? "You think this is best for me?" I asked, my voice growing firmer. "You think it's best for me to just walk away from my home? From everything I've built? Everything I've worked for?" Ryan's face twisted with guilt, but he didn't back down. "I'm just trying to make sure you're taken care of," he said, his tone defensive. "This is about making sure we're all okay." I stood up then, the chair scraping across the floor as I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. "You're not taking this from me," I said quietly, almost to myself. "I've had enough of being pushed around." The silence between us stretched on. When I turned back around, I saw the look on Ryan's face. The realization was there, flickering behind his eyes. He knew he couldn't sway me anymore. "You don't get to make these decisions for me," I said firmly, my voice resolute. "This house is mine, and I'm not going anywhere." Ryan stood up, looking defeated. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words never came. I watched him leave, and as the door closed behind him, I finally allowed myself to feel the release. I had drawn the line, and I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't just fighting for the house, I was fighting for my dignity. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had my power back. The weeks that followed were filled with a sense of quiet determination. I no longer feared the phone calls from Ryan or Jessica. Each time they reached out, I calmly reminded them that the house, the money, the trust, it was all mine. I didn't need to ask for permission. I had the power to decide my own future, and they would have to learn that the hard way. It wasn't about the material things, not really. It was about respect. About standing up for myself after so many years of being overlooked. There were still moments of doubt, of course. There were days when I would sit in the quiet of my living room, the silence weighing on me, and I would wonder if I had made the right choice. But then I would remember everything I had gone through, everything I had endured, and I knew that I wasn't wrong. I wasn't weak. I had done what I had to do. One afternoon Ryan called again. This time his voice wasn't filled with anger or frustration. It was quiet, almost hesitant. "Mom," he said, his tone softer than I had ever heard it. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath, but I didn't hesitate. "Of course," I replied. "Come over." When he arrived, I could see the change in him. He looked tired, worn down, like he had been carrying a heavy weight. He sat down across from me, and for a long time we just sat there, neither of us saying a word. Then finally he spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, Mom," he said, his voice low. "About how we treated you. About how we took you for granted." I didn't say anything. I just waited for him to continue. "I was wrong," he said quietly, looking me in the eye. "I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. But I see now that I was just thinking about myself. About what I wanted. And I'm sorry." The words hung in the air between us. It wasn't easy for him to say, but I could see the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time I felt like he truly understood. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you know." We sat there for a while longer, talking about the past, the mistakes, the things we both wished we had done differently. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was the start of something new. By the time Ryan left that day, something had changed. We weren't where we used to be, but we were on our way to rebuilding something based on mutual respect, not obligation. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I had fought for myself, and in doing so I had opened a door to healing not just for me but for the whole family.